So today we're going to talk about how to sustain mindfulness. For mindfulness to develop, we need to have continuity over time. And that means that we try to close the gaps between this moment of being attentive and the next moment of being attentive. That's part of the development of our meditation practice. Every time our attention is distracted, every time we literally forget that we're meditating, we've actually created a gap in that continuity. So if you think our task is just to experience each moment as it arises, yeah? The entirety of it, our whole experience of it. Every time we're distracted, there's a section that we've missed, isn't there? And this could be just a distraction, like getting dragged out to a sound and suddenly you find we're commenting on it in our head. Yeah? Or it could be a thought, it could be dulling out, becoming sleepy. It could be a pain in your knee. It could be planning of what you're going to do after you leave here. It can be many different things. But all of these are creating gaps. So it almost seems impossible that we could actually experience or be present for every moment, doesn't it? We're trying to watch the breath, we're trying to follow each moment of watching the breathing as it comes in and out. We'll use mindfulness of in and out breathing as the basis for this. But every time we try, our attention goes off somewhere. And then we can get around that with concentration. We can have very strong concentration practice. And we can literally feel and follow each moment. But if we become too concentrated, right, then the object starts to appear permanent over time. It appears to always be there. Now, mindfulness practice is a study of change. And we're studying how our attention moves and coming to understand why it moves. And so if we block out by fixing our attention too strongly, if we block out what we're experiencing, right? And eventually go into a conceptual object, which is in deep concentration practice, you do that. Then you're not going to get that understanding, that knowledge, that wisdom. And it's that understanding that frees you. So I'll just unpack this a bit for you, make it easier to understand. Say in mindfulness of breathing, sitting here watching the breath. Each breath coming in and out, it's all going well. I'm following it, I'm seeing detail, starting to get concentrated. Mind's not wandering off that much. And then suddenly, bang, I realise that I've been off thinking. What should I do now? What should I do? It's a question.
Gently bring your attention back.
You bring your attention back to the breath. Why do we do that?
So you can close the gap.
So we can close the gap. If we were doing concentration practice, that would be the right answer. But since we're practicing mindfulness, a wisdom practice, it's the wrong answer. And this is what I ran into on the retreat on the weekend. Initially, when we're doing the practice, we need to build up a level of concentration. For those of you who were with me last year, you can remember I explained there was two paths. You can build up very deep concentration and then do the mindfulness practice with that as a basis. The thing is, they can't do the mindfulness practice while they're into mental absorptions. They literally have to come out of it and then reflect on the mind state after they're out. Because in deep concentration, you cannot do the practice. In very deep concentration. But they go that path because when they come out, that very powerful, equanimous, concentrated mind just bores through everything, and the knowledge arises very quickly. Then there's the other path, which is more suited to everyday life, which is the one that I'm passing on to you. It's harder for us to develop that jhana path, the very deep concentration path, because you can't have distractions. Your job is to ignore all distractions. Your job is, if you wander off on a thought, to bring your attention back to the breath. To a sound, bring it back. You're ignoring all distractions, and your mind becomes more and more and more absorbed into the object. Now, it's a very valid path, but not many people can do it in daily life. When people normally do it, they do it in professionally designed meditation areas that are very quiet, very still, in monasteries or in caves. Or they try to head somewhere where they won't be disturbed. For us, that's not a possibility, is it? Fortunately, you can do mindfulness practice without going to the jhanic level of concentration. So when I've got you sitting here in the beginning and say, okay, place your awareness in your body, feel the heaviness of your body, feel the touch of your buttocks touching the chair or the floor, then immerse your awareness in your body, anchor your attention in the center of your body. What am I doing? What am I getting you to do? No, I'm not getting you to be mindful.
Move your attention.
No.
You're aware of your body.
You're aware of your body, but why are we doing this? I did hear somebody said it and then it stopped. Was it you, was it? Concentration. We're building up our concentration. I say, anchor your attention in that touch point, right? Anchor it there. Don't allow it to wander. Hold it in the one spot. Then eventually get you to just hold it in your body and then immerse your awareness, soften into your body, immerse your awareness in the center, giving you a very easy to feel anchor. So notice when we initially do that, you come in from everyday life and all kind of restless, mentally restless and da-da-da. Notice after we do that, we've worked into our body, gone more and more into it, anchored our attention there, how your mind starts to settle down. You find that it doesn't wander as much. So what we're doing is we're building up the initial concentration to get past that restlessness. So even if sounds happen, you'll find you won't get drawn out as much. If you're holding that at the moment, you'll find you won't get drawn out. So you're actually building concentration. You're holding your attention on one point and you're not allowing anything to drag it away from that point. Can you see? Even when we're doing the mindfulness of breathing practice, I always guide you in the same way because I find this the easiest way to develop that initial concentration. When we're watching the breath in mindfulness practice, we're watching it come in and out. And then suddenly you notice your attention's been dragged to a thought. If you're doing concentration practice, sure. If you need more concentration, keep bringing it back. But when you're not being as disturbed or as dragged out, what you need to do then is not pull the mind back from the thought, but make the thinking itself the object of meditation. In mindfulness practice, the object of meditation changes, it moves. We're not interested in fighting our attention, we're interested in understanding how it moves. And to understand that, we actually have to move with it. Can you see? Now, how do we actually pay that attention to thinking? Now, firstly, we're not interested in the content of the thought. That's just blah, blah, blah. You get involved in that, it won't help anything. Nothing at all. It's just a story that's being generated. That's what the mind does. The mind generates stories from moment to moment to create our life. It's thinking about our life constantly and creating it. The story of our life. It's writing it. It's like a script writer. Yeah. This will be the tragedy that we're going to have, and this is going to be the happiness we're going to have. And then suddenly there's a twist in the plot. Guess what? The boy didn't get the girl. And they didn't live happily ever after. It's kind of like that, isn't it? You think you're going somewhere and it collapses. The mind's job is to do that, is to take all this sense information and turn it into a story. That's what it does. Problem is when we think this story is real. We think it's preordained or predestined. It's not. The script can always be changed. You're the producer, you can say, no, don't like this script, changing it to another one. Yeah? But we don't normally do that, do we? So, when your attention gets dragged to the thought off the breath, what you do is you notice the movement of your attention. Even if you didn't notice, the moment you notice that you've been off thinking, turn your attention to what it feels like to think. Turn your attention to what it feels like to suddenly realise that you were lost in thinking. Has anyone noticed that? Some of you have been meditating longer might have noticed that. There's a definite transition between being lost in thought and suddenly knowing that you were lost in thought. It's like boom, oh. And it's actually quite unpleasant, isn't it? It's like a jolt. And if you haven't experienced it in meditation yet, you probably experienced it in everyday life when you're daydreaming and then someone tapped you on the shoulder. And you kind of, oh, that jolt. That's what you're interested in. There's sudden transition of awareness there. You've suddenly gone from being unaware of what's happening around you to suddenly being aware of what's happening. What happened there? What was going on there? Isn't that interesting? It's these points between being almost feeling like we're unconscious and being conscious, or our attention being turned away from this world, lost in the world in our head, to suddenly being slammed back into reality. These are the points. So what you want to do is, this moment you do it, linger there for a while. What does that feel like? That transition. If the thinking persists, what does the thought feel like? Is the thought obsessive? Is the thought enchanting? Is the thought painful? Right? There's an aspect of unpleasantness or pleasantness to the thought. This is what's keeping you thinking it. You're either torturing yourself with it or you're actually getting some pleasure. But regardless, both ways we're getting a perverse pleasure out of it. We get pleasure out of feeling unhappy. Human beings are like that. Well, notice how often people like to talk about how unhappy they are. We all do. So we're getting off on it. We're enjoying it. It's really weird, isn't it? But we do, don't we? Yeah? So look at this. Look at that aspect of pleasantness or unpleasantness. What's driving the thought? When you turn your attention there, guess what's going to happen to the thought? Anybody from experience? What happens to the thought when you turn your attention on that aspect?
It disappears.
It disappears. It dissolves. Notice there's suddenly a change of relationship there between being lost in the thought, no awareness of what's going on, and suddenly observing the thought, not participating in it anymore. It's not being fed, so it dissolves. Can you see this is where the juice is? you're starting to learn that the thinking persists because of your participation. You're also starting to learn how the thinking actually drags you off and creates a different reality other than what is real. So can you see these transition points are important? So if I'm sitting here meditating, getting dragged off into a thought, the moment I realise that I've been lost, I turn my attention on that aspect. What does it feel like to suddenly be mindful again? What does it feel like to be lost in that thinking? Right? If it's an unpleasant feeling or I don't like the thought, the thinking itself is no longer the object. You turn your attention on the unpleasantness. Right? The unpleasant feeling. If you start disliking that unpleasant feeling, the disliking is now the object. If you start thinking about it again, then suddenly the thought is the object. Right? If there is nothing drawing your attention anymore, you come back to the breath. So the breath is like your home base. It's your anchor. You build concentration up on the breathing, and you also observe the breathing and learn about your relationship to it. It's your point to come back to when nothing is drawing your attention. Sitting here watching the breath, there's a pull towards a sound. Feel the pull, then go with it. Sit your attention squarely on the sound. Hear the sound. Watch how a sound is a flow of very subtle changes. It's not a thing. It's a whole lot of moments strung together, an experience of the sound and a memory, and when the memory becomes long enough, it becomes something. When you're hearing me speak, you're actually experiencing a whole lot of little events. Because of memory of those events, it strings together and you interpret it as me speaking. I'm not saying all these words in the same moment. Can you see how it's working? This is how we start to understand how it works. Start to understand how we carry, over time, memory from the past to create, right? To create an ability to interpret the present. And this is what you're doing. So what you're doing is your job is not to fight the mind wandering around, but it's to stay with it and notice it playing with things. Remember the mother watching the child play with the toy? We're not interested so much in the toy, but in the child playing with the toy, in the child's relationship with the toy. We're watching the mind playing with things. It goes to the sound. It doesn't like the sound. Okay, the dislike. We start to feel irritated. Suddenly the irritation is the object of meditation. We start to get angry. The feeling of anger is the object. Then we start thinking and proliferating in our head about, I wish those people would just go away or that banging would stop so I could meditate. Then suddenly that obsessive thought, the obsessiveness in it is that. Feel the pain in that sort of thinking. Feel how that thinking and those reactions are actually making you suffer. Feel the pain. If you feel it through doing this, through following where your attention goes and feeling what's really going on, you'll feel the pain in pleasant obsessions and unpleasant obsessions, and you'll start to become disenchanted with them. Disenchanted with them. In the same way, when I was younger, I used to drink a lot of alcohol, get really drunk. And I was weird, always kind of different, as in I would actually pay more attention to how bad I felt after it, and most of the time bad during it, rather than those small periods of happiness. And the more you start to turn your attention on how bad it makes you feel, the more disenchanted you come with it, and it no longer enchants you. You no longer have that desire to get drunk. In the same way with this thinking, with these emotions and obsessions, if you turn your attention all the time on them, you'll start to notice how indulging in them creates pain. You start to become disenchanted with them. You decide, I don't really want to play with them anymore. I know where it leads. It will make me feel sick. And so the disenchantment is the real letting go. Your attention just no longer has an interest in it. And that's how the mind starts to not move as much. Because this is a process through understanding of disenchantment. So we're not forcing it not to move like we do in concentration, right? We're not training it not to move by absorbing into one object. We're allowing it to move, but we're doing it in such a way that we gain knowledge about why it moves, gain knowledge about its enchantment in things, and seeing the pain that arises out of that, our relationship to it starts to change. But you can only do that when you're separate from the object, separate from the thinking, separate from the emotion, separate from whatever. When you're lost in it, as you noticed, you don't know a thing, do you? When you're lost in that thought, you don't know until you're out of it. But when you're out of it, that's the time you can actually learn about that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what you want to do is feel that free flow of attention. So to sum it up, what we're doing is we're taming a wild horse. We can actually hold its reins and hold it in tight and get dragged all over the paddock and just get beaten up badly. Or we can either hop on its back and stay on its back and allow it to buck and jump around wherever it wants to. But our job is to stay with it. Yeah? That's remembering, where's my attention now? Where is the centre of my attention now? And that centre is changing all the time. That's the skill. Yeah? Or we can actually stand in the middle, have a long rope, and allow the horse to run around circles, but keep it on the long rope till it tires itself out. The anchor is concentration, the rope is mindfulness. So when we're using concentration as an anchor, like anchored in our body, watch your attention jump around, watch it jump to a sound, to a thought, but keep anchored in your body. That's like anchor in the middle, long rope of mindfulness, know where the horse is running. Or the other one isn't using the strong concentration to hold still, you're sitting on the horse's back. Wherever your attention is going, your job is to go with it. Two different ways of doing it. Both just as valid. Does that make sense how that works? Yeah, so your job's not to fight it. Your job is to know where the attention's going to and what its relationship is to wherever it goes. Does that make sense?
It does now.
It does now?
You've said that many times before, but I've never related to it as you've explained it now.
Oh, good. Hopefully it's because I'm getting better. Okay, so what I'd like to do, let's do a mindfulness of breathing practice. And what I want you to do is we're going to be watching we're going to move in, we'll watch the breathing coming in and out, staying with it, feel your concentration build up as we go in. And then what I want you to do now is when your attention goes off, don't fight it. Goes to a sound, feel it bounce to a sound, boom. If it sits on a sound, feel it just sitting on it. Feel your relationship to it, no longer drawing your attention, come back to the breath.
We're not getting involved in the sound though, are we?
No, that's just the story. To get involved in it, you'll start telling a story to yourself about
It's
it.
like the boy with the beautiful voice.
Yeah, the boy with the beautiful voice.
Yeah.
Or the lady with the screaming child that, can't she control that child? Can't she see there's a sign out there that says there's meditation in here? Do you know what I mean? These are just all stories.
Yeah.
They're just all stories. That's what we're learning about. Want to give it a go?
Yeah.
Awesome.
You did say that we could label it, saying...
You can use labelling, yeah. Yeah, I haven't gotten to labelling this year yet, but if you've learnt techniques, you can use labelling and counting and all sorts of things if you want. But labelling does make it easier. Yeah. So just close your eyes over lightly. Start to be aware of the feeling of your body sitting on the chair or on the floor. Be aware of the place where your buttocks touches the chair or the floor. Anchor your attention there and watch how your concentration starts to grow. Now immerse your awareness in the whole of your body and watch how your concentration continues to anchor your attention. Now I'd like you to start to relax into your body. And as you relax into your body, you'll start to notice your breathing as it comes in and as it goes out. Relax into any tension you're holding in your breathing. Now be aware of how your attention wanders around. When you have nothing drawing your attention, come back to the breathing, observing and relaxing into it. Gently bring your awareness back into your body. Relax into, anchor your attention within your body. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. Be aware of seeing. Be aware of being in the room. So as you can see, we've introduced a different skill into the practice of knowing where your attention's sitting. When we're acknowledging what we're experiencing rather than saying, this shouldn't be here, we should be with that, a different relationship is developing to what's going on. Yeah? Mindfulness practice is about learning to be okay with whatever you're experiencing. It doesn't matter what you're experiencing. Yeah? You're developing the ability to be with it without judgment, without trying to change it. If we're watching the breath and suddenly we're distracted by a sound or a thought, and we pull our attention away and bring it back to the breath, we're basically saying, this shouldn't be there, it's supposed to be this. My attention is supposed to be sitting here. So we're basically reacting the way that we do in normal life anyway, aren't we? Continuously driven by running towards pleasant experience and running away from unpleasant experience. It's just, human life is just continuous that, isn't it? There's no choice. We're either running away or we're running towards. This practice is teaching you to be okay with whatever is. Not running away, not running towards. Not putting this in the good box and this in the bad box. When you get the continuity of mindfulness going over a period of time, the concentration will build because you always have an object of attention. You don't need to fix it. It's momentary concentration, and it builds up to genic level.
What do you mean by genic level?
It's a mental absorption. Mind becomes very, put it simply, the mind becomes very powerfully concentrated, and it actually penetrates deeply into whatever it sits on. And we can open up a whole can of worms and get very complicated here, so I'm not going to step there. But it actually sees, there's 3 characteristics that it sees when it goes there, but we won't go there. But because you've got the continuity, it will build, the concentration will build to a very strong level, till it's just like absorbing into this. Now it's absorbing into this, and this, and this, rather than that just absorbed into one thing. It's changing, the object's changing all the time, but it's moment to moment, right? So the momentum builds up through that. When you continuously, over time, can be mindful and the concentration builds, eventually you're experiencing equanimity, which is a state of mind that neither pushes away nor grabs onto. It doesn't judge. It's still, it's unmoved by the world. Unmoved. And in this very balanced state of mind, you get this subtle pleasure that is higher than any other pleasure you can get. It's not a stimulated pleasure. It's a pleasure that comes from being unstimulated, unmoved. And it actually brings a very deep happiness and deep contentment. And a deep feeling that there's nothing more for you to do, and there never was anything for you to do. But this only comes out of wisdom, understanding. So as you can see, learning to go with the movement of the mind instead of fighting it means that you can then bring it into everyday life. And so just because we've stopped meditating doesn't mean that we've stopped meditating. Once you understand this practice, it travels through everything, because in any moment throughout the whole of your life you're still only experiencing one thing. Whether you're sitting with your eyes closed or you're doing the washing, you're still experiencing just one thing at a time. So if you learn to be continuously mindful of where your attention is sitting, the practice will continue to develop. And that's how it will develop to a very deep level in everyday life. So what we're doing in formal practice is training to take it out into everyday life. So every conscious moment we're mindful of. Every conscious moment we know, and we know our relationship to it. We're not lost in it. We're having that same thing where we're watching the thinking rather than being lost in the thinking. Watching the emotion instead of being lost in it. And when you do that, then that change in relationship will happen to things that cause you pain. Yeah? The disenchantment will happen. And then the deep happiness and contentment arises out of that. Does that make sense? Fantastic.